Have you ever let your fear stop you from pursuing what you really wanted to do? Maybe in career, maybe in a business, maybe speaking up at a meeting. Whatever you told yourself about this failure, is not something to be feared but embraced. Let's take Oprah Winfrey for example. She was once fired from her television reporter job, her first job. They said that she was unfit for television. Imagine hearing those words, knowing how hard you worked. And most people just walk away thinking that they failed, but not Oprah, as we all know her. Instead, she let the failure not stop her. She used it as motivation to push her forward. And today, she is the most powerful, successful woman that we know. Her story is the powerful one regarding failure isn't the end, it's the beginning of something great. Well, I want to welcome you. Today, I'm Dr. Cheryl Clark. And in the next 20 or 30 minutes from here, I'm going to be discussing how you can begin to embrace failure. And this is where I help people to find their voice, regulate their emotions, and keep the step into the confidence of their personal and professional power. And through my work, we're working with individuals and leading them to clarity and taking their wholeness, whether it's right there in their own homes or their career or their communities. And today, this topic that we're going to dive into, embracing your fear and unlocking that potential, is not about what we have done, it's about what we have learned from. So, don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video with anyone you think who could benefit from it and stepping into their own power. All right. So let's get started. So, like I said, in today's video, we're going to talk about fear and failure and why it holds us back. And most importantly, how to change your mindset when you hear the word fear or failure and the necessary parts for us to be successful, because it is necessary. Because the one thing about failure, it's not the one thing that stands, it's the I guess I could say it's the one thing that stands between us being successful and not. Because not only is the one thing about how many of us fear to do something, it's where the fear lies and where it comes from. Maybe in our career, our relationship, in our day-to-day lives. The truth is, the failure is not your enemy. It's a part of the process. And it's necessary for us to step onto the road of success. And in today's teaching, I'm going to show you what is fear, right? And what is the fear of failure? And I'm going to teach you 4 mindset shifts that's going to go beyond you just standing in the fear, but embracing the failure, right? And embracing that with tools so you can grow and learn from that. So I want to just tell you a little bit about who I am and why I say this is so important. As a Black therapist, I felt that I felt the need that the fear of my failure sometimes can come up, because I know there's countless times, there's only 7% of therapists in the United States that are of color. And I felt the responsibility to share the message, get the message out there about mental health and using your voice, emotional regulation, standing in your power, whether at home or in the boardroom. And I know that it's important for us as me as a woman of color to the voice, and I need to have this space right here. And I know that at times when I did this, every time I turn on my camera and hit record, absolutely fear starts to seep in, right? Every time I share my story, every time I may share a bit of advice, or I may share a tip or put myself out there, I'm taking a risk. But here's what the reality is. If it's not you, if it's not me, then who? My success is tied to something bigger than just me. So is yours. So let me ask you this one question. I always start with a question. What's holding you back from taking a risk? What's the fear? What's stopping you from stepping out in your power, from pursuing those goals? If it's just losing weight, if it's moving that, if it's moving to a new career, that fear of failure is very normal and you're not alone. So I want to start by telling you to get your pad, your pencil. If it's your first time here, I always write down some notes that will be helpful to you. So go ahead and get your pads and pencils out and or your smart pads, whichever you use, to jot it down for later. So you can use this as an opportunity for you to go back to your notes, right? So why we fear failure? Let's go into some psychology behind the fear of failure. Okay? So the fear of failure is something that we all have. So I want to normalize the fear of failure and what this looks like. Okay? Now there's a big psychology word and it's called atychiphobia, right? So atychiphobia, I don't want you to be scared of the word. It's just a word that what it means. And I'm going to give you the definition of what atychiphobia is. Trust more, right? Oh, my marker's going out. Atychiphobia. All right. All right. Atychiphobia. Atychiphobia is the fear of failure. And this stems from past experiences like childhood trauma, things of that nature. And what fear of failure with atychiphobia is more than just a reluctancy to make mistakes, right? It's deeply ingrained fear that can really hold you back from taking risks and pursuing opportunities and even trying new things. So some people may have a fear of doing some things in life because of past experiences. So growing up in maybe an overcritical home or teachers, possibly authority figures who have placed high emphasis on success or maybe punishment, criticize or failures. Of when you did fail at something, it makes a person internalize the beliefs of their self-worth, right, in the world. And depending on their achievement or depending on what they did or did not do, it can impact your self-worth. So as we reinforce these things as we get older, it gives you with the beliefs that you're tied into your success. So that's the first thing that atychiphobia is. And the next thing is perfectionism. And you hear me talk about this sometimes. Like some people, they develop this being a perfectionist, right? And they have a tendency, if they do make a mistake, it sets them back, or they're not adequate, or they harshly judge themselves, and they disappointed in their actions, and it increases the fear of failure. And a lot of times, also, fear of failure can be tied to a traumatic event. So, like I did say in the very beginning, a traumatic event could have happened in childhood, but it could also happen in adulthood also, where significantly things that you were embarrassed in social settings, rejection, negativity, it comes with a deep emotional scar. And I want to validate that scar, right? Making a person fearful of situations in the future. So that instead of them taking a risk because of that event that happened to them. Then also social pressures is another thing that's tied to fear of failure. Cultures, the communities, things of that nature, they have a heavy emphasis on success, possibly, and leading individuals really to fear failure, and it can result into loss, right? It can result into you not taking a risk. There's another one that you may have heard about, and it's called performance anxiety, right? And this refers to in fear with expectations of failing when performing well, right? Or not. So particularly in situations where you need to perform, maybe at school or work or social settings, and it's tied to you having a fear of rejection or a fear of inadequacy. So this is depending on the concept of when we look at atychiphobia, all right? So this is the concept of, I like to give you some type of psychology surrounding what this is. And what I'm going to do right now is as we learning what this is and what it's not, I want to look at some mindset shifts that we're going to see how we can begin to embrace what what is the fear of failure. So the first mindset, the number one that we're going to go to, the first one is overcoming the fear, right? Failure. Overcoming the failure, and failure is a teacher. Okay? So the first shift is failure is not final, but failure is a teacher. I want you to write that down. Failure is not final. Failure is a teacher. Now, I want you to sit with that just a little bit. The part of your success that knowing that failure is inevitable is necessary for your growth. Failure is not the end. The failure is not final. All right? So failure is it's not final. It's not final. So it's not final. Put that down. Failure is not final, but it's a teacher. Failure is a teacher, right? So every time we fail, we're given an opportunity to learn something new about ourselves, our methods, our goals. We get to shift it a little bit. Instead of seeing that failure is a dead end, we need to view it as how can we learn from the feedback. And it gives us a chance to adapt, right? It gives us a chance to improve. So in this part, I want you to ask yourself, what can I learn from me failing at this or this setback? Or what can I shift? How can I shift my mind in this? And moving into this, the real life examples that we talked about, we could take Steve Jobs. He got fired from Apple, and he said that was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. J.K. Rowling, we know this author of Harry Potter. She was rejected over 12 times. Imagine getting rejected 12 times. And she was on welfare. She was on welfare, a single mom on welfare. And she said, I'm going to keep going on. And now she is one of the most famous authors of the Harry Potter series. And of course, like I opened up with Oprah Winfrey. She was fired from her first job. They didn't feel like she had the look for it. Now she is worth billions, and she has millions of fans that look and stand on what her advice is. They go to her. Now, I want you to look at that concept of failure. And I hope it gives you this a little step, one step further into the shift of understanding. The second mindset shift is avoiding risks to embracing risks. So we go from avoiding risks, so the mindset shift, number two, mindset shift number two is we want to go from avoiding the risk to basically embracing the risk. That's mindset number two. Now, when we look at avoiding the risk, now, avoiding the risk often stems from the fear of failure. But when we avoid the risk, we avoid growth, tremendous growth. So to overcome this, we need to shift our mindset, embrace the opportunities for learning and advancement. So I do this through something called a cognitive audit. Cheryl, what is a cognitive audit? A cognitive audit is a process that examines your thoughts, your beliefs, and what holds you back. And the audit really sends up like 4 questions I kind of ask you. And you can do this yourself for yourself, and I encourage you to do this. So if you need to pause the video right now and then you go back and ask yourself these questions and write it down, I encourage you to do that. The first question is, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Second question, is this fear rational? Or is it based on a worst case scenario? What is it based on? The third question, what is the best outcome if I take this risk? And fourth, can I learn? What can I learn? Even if things don't go as planned. Because times, and we know that times have this really finite thing that things don't go as we plan. But by editing and auditing your thoughts, you can see that much of the fear surrounding the risk is very exaggerated. We stay a lot in the future based on assumptions, right? We allow what makes us, we need to allow ourselves to be more conscious with our decisions, to be empowered by our decisions, rather than letting your fear dictate your actions. So when you're taking these small steps, I want you to look at yourself and I want you to take small informed steps that we're going to get into in a couple of minutes. And when you look at these informed steps, I want you to see how you are not going to allow yourself from being held back anymore. Because you being able to now be informed about your steps, it reduces the fear. Now, I'm not going to say that the fear goes completely away. It reduces the fear and begins to build confidence as you begin to do it more and more. And it gives you the ability to take new challenges on. So the biggest risk isn't the failure. The biggest thing is staying stagnant and not taking the risk, not doing the action. So this is where you can begin to look and see where you can move. The third one, the shift from all or nothing thinking, or to the process of you understanding you got the process over perfection. So the shift from all or nothing thinking, or to moving to the shift to progress over perfection. That means that you're going to address the procrastination here. So that's me, mindset number 3. Mindset number 3 is shift the all or nothing thinking. And when you do this, you can begin to see how you need to move from progress to perfection. So when I say progress over perfection, that means that we usually progress over perfection. I mean, progress over, you're going to move to progress. Make sure that's clear. Over perfection. Because at times when we feel like we need to be perfect, this is when we get trapped. Okay? All right. So let me explain this just a little bit. Avoiding risks, like we said earlier, often when we look at the fear of failure, when we avoid the risk, we avoid the growth. So to overcome this, we need to embrace the opportunities of learning. So the power of this tool, as we look at when we just did the audit, when we're looking at our lives and how we're moving in a space of taking this opportunity that the nothing, all or nothing is a finite, the all of nothing of failure. When we look at failure in the face, it seems like this is the end all be all. This is what am I going to do here? How am I going to move forward here? I made this mistake. How do I move forward? I don't understand what's happening here. Because with the perfectionism, it can lead to paralysis. And when you have paralysis, it leads to procrastination. It leads to delay of you even doing this. And it's not about you being lazy, but it's about us avoiding the negative emotion that's tied into the fear of failure. So if you think about this, if you didn't do something perfect, it may cause you anxiety in some people. So you avoid it altogether. And the root of this is of the procrastination in many of us is that when we avoid the work, when we're avoiding the feelings, we are feeling as though we're inadequate or we're going to have the feeling of failure. So, how do you overcome this? You need to first recognize the negative emotion. That's number one. When you recognize this negative emotion, you need to identify the emotion that you're avoiding. I want you to ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to escape from through procrastination? Is it fear? Is it shame? Is it embarrassment? And I want you to acknowledge it because these feelings are normal too. But we don't have to always have control, and they don't always have to control you. The second thing is to shifting this is embracing the small wins. See, the bigger the task is, we need to begin to make the smaller manageable steps. So I teach my clients in each small step forward is progress. So as you're progressing, it will lead you to long-term success. So that's why consistency, staying focused, staying there, staying the track, right? Staying on task, maybe getting some people to help you along the way. Focusing on the inch in the little small progress. You begin to alleviate all the pressures of needing to be perfect. And it reduces the procrastination at times when you continue to do this. And then don't be afraid to shift the goal. Instead of aiming that you're flawless or you have to execute it, remember, it's not an all or nothing type of thinking, right? It gets you to along the way after you shift the all or nothing mindset. See, one celebration of progress, you build momentum. So the progress here is no matter how small it is, it moves you forward. It moves you towards that goal. And you can do this over time, right? And when the fears associated with negative emotions, what starts to happen is that the fear can grow, right? So you need to look how to embrace progress over perfection. It's not an all or nothing type of thinking. So turn that procrastination into action. You no longer have to be held back by the fear. It's not doing you any good, but I want you to be empowered by the journey of continuous movement. Remember the little small steps that you can take. Just the small steps can begin to move you into that, into your bigger future. And the last mind shift that we're going to say today, the mind shift number 4, mind shift, the mind shift set that we need to do for number 4. Okay, the mindset shift number 4 is desensitizing to failure. Desensitizing the failure and embracing the failure. Desensitizing the failure by embracing the failure. What are you saying, Cheryl? Well, first of all, when you desensitize something, we're going to talk about that just a little bit. Let me just write down the word here. Desensitizing the failure. Okay? Desensitizing the failure by embracing the failure. Now, when you gradually, there's something I like to talk about here, and that is introducing you to gradually exposing yourself in ways that you could desensitize the fear. Now, this happens over time. Now, when you are emotionally attached to your failure, right? And it could be a challenge for you to embrace that part of your journey. So, or let it be desensitized. But I want you to look and see how many of you, how many of us internalize our failures. And it means so much to us. We give it so much meaning. And let me explain a little bit about that, because the difference between I failed and I'm a failure, there's a big difference in that. And when you look at how I want you to separate the failure from your identity, I want you to begin to separate that, because your failure is not your identity. It's just examples of what has happened that you may have failed at. And I want you to look at your life, and I want you to separate the failure from your identity, desensitizing the failure, realizing the failure doesn't define you. The failure is something that happened. It doesn't mean that you are a failure. It means that it was part of the process. And by emotionally detaching your sense of self-worth from the outcome, you are taking more, you're going to take more risks, because eventually you're going to see that failure is just part of the journey. And more times that you go forward in this, you can actually see that failure is necessary for your journey. And when you begin to look and see how you can be able to move in this, it's you saying that I am not going to allow myself to be trapped in me, being able to say, I am not going to do or say anything that's going to make me feel like a failure. So as you are now desensitizing, now it's time for you to embrace it. Embracing it is not personalizing the failure to your identity. And when you do that, you understand that this opportunity is here for your pathway for you to grow on your journey. Secondly, the role of self-compassion. I want you to use this tool. When you are being kind to yourself, I want you to show yourself compassion. I want you to look at how you can say, I am going to now move in this area now, that I'm going to be compassionate on myself, that I did. Because when you do this, you're going to find yourself more resilient after a comeback. You're going to find yourself resilient after a setback, I should say. And then you're going to find yourself on a comeback. The third one I want to talk about is taking an informed and a conscious risk. Now, this is important. A lot of times when we are moving and making decisions, I want you to make an informed and conscious risk. Instead of just diving into situations blindly, we need to gather information, assess them. What's the potential outcome? Is it aligned with my higher purpose goal? What is that? Because oftentimes, most times, science does show, research does show that we stay in our subconscious mind, and often we're running on autopilot. And this is influencing our decisions based on past fears, based on what has happened before, based on past failures. And by us taking control of this conscious risk, we can now step out of the automatic mode and bring our choices to the light of awareness. And this allows you to act intentionally, encouraging you that the risk that we're aligned with is in our personal growth and long-term vision. So the key is balancing the informed risk right? And understanding the pros and cons while we're trusting that we can step into these uncertain areas, right? Because they are uncertain. We don't know what the future may hold. But as we give ourselves a rewarding breakthrough of this is the way I can embrace it, I can now inform myself. And sometimes this can be a challenge. Risks become very challenging. However, the opportunities for you to grow and align yourself more closely with your even your higher purpose is the reward. So, and the last thing, the power of learning from the failure. I want you to look at the lessons, right? Because every failure is a lesson in disguise. And as we look at your life, and as you look at your life, as you've heard the stories I've shared about Oprah Winfrey, about Steve Jobs and others, I want you to look at your life. And I want you to begin to look and see where in your life that you may be stuck in a failure and that you may be losing your voice, that you may not be able to embrace yourself, that you may have not separated your identity from your failure. It may be defining you. And practicing these steps of desensitizing the fear, practicing the steps of understanding how you can be more informed, how you can begin to move in the approach of understanding the risks are necessary. And that when you are moving in truly understanding that these lessons are in disguise, and remembering that early on in your career, early on in your life, there's things that you've learned. I've learned a lot through my years. I may have been disappointed. I may have questioned myself along the way. But looking back at the failures more and more, I can say that I have learned from them. And it has revealed that I needed to grow in certain areas in my career, in my family life, in my person as a woman, as a therapist, all these areas. And I want you to see every misstep or failure has led you to this point of your life. Each failure wasn't a setback. It was an opportunity, an important opportunity to step forward. And you can begin to refine your voice, strengthen your purpose, and remember that each failure you face is a hidden lesson. So these lessons will bring you closer and closer to your own true potential. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today as we explored the power of embracing your failure. And I hope that you remember that your failure is just a lesson in disguise. And with the right mindset shift, these lessons can propel you to a great future to success. It's not about avoiding your failures, remember that, but it's about you using the tools so you can grow and transform your life and maybe others around you. So I want to keep inviting you to this journey of speaking your power now. Go ahead and join the community. It's a space where you'll find support, tools, and resources will help you lead and unlock your voice. Whether it's at home or in your career or beyond, it doesn't matter. If you want to, if this message resonated with you, I want you to like it. I want you to share it. I want you to love it out. Tell people that we are speaking our power now here on this platform. And let's continue to have these conversations. Comment in below so I can see what's one of your failures that taught you an important lesson. I want to hear your stories. This is how I know what content to bring you. Thanks again. And remember that sometimes your life is defined by one single moment. Let that moment be today. And remember that your voice does matter. Until next time.